My name is Nina Wutrick, and I've been studying women's clothing in late 15th and early 16th century Venice this semester, and I'd like to share some of my research with you now. A Frenchman, Villemont, visiting Venice in the 16th century, described the exaggerated forms of the styles worn by Venetian women thus: "They appear a foot taller than the men, because they are mounted on paten of wood, covered with leather, which are at least a foot high, so that they are obliged to have a woman to aid them walk, and another to carry their train. But the Romans, Milanese, Neapolitans, Florentines, Ferrarins, and other ladies of Italy are more modest, for their patens are not as high." The clothing of Venetian women in the late 15th and early 16th centuries is well documented by Venetian diarists and foreign visitors such as Villemont, as well as in paintings and sketches by contemporary artists. However, this clothing is largely unremarked upon in modern art historical scholarship, except in discussions of the artist's skill in depicting cloth, or as a tool to date the painting itself. Venice's position on the lagoon, surrounded by water rather than neighboring city-states, made its clothing unique to the city. Though Venetian women and tailors surely knew the fashion trends of Florence and Milan, it was difficult to journey outside of the lagoon to observe these trends firsthand. As a result, Venetian clothing built on its own precedents, literally shooting to new heights of absurdity. Two uniquely Venetian influences on the styles of the late 15th and early 16th century seem to be at odds with one another: the religiously charged sumptuary laws that aimed to curb the elaborate expense of women's clothing, and the fashion of the courtesans, highly educated and respected sex workers who blurred the lines of class distinction with their ambiguous style of dress. Venetian fashion of this period is epitomized by the work of Vittore Carpaccio, especially his painting of the mid-1490s, Two Venetian Ladies on a Balcony. Here, the titular yet unidentified women sit and amuse themselves, wearing clothes at the height of fashion. The woman in yellow wears chopines, high platform shoes. The chopines are not visible under her skirt, but their presence is evident from the length and silhouette of her dress. Another pair of these shoes are clumsily thrown aside on the left side of the painting. Both women wear rich, multicolored dresses with slashed sleeves, fringe, and very high waistline. From the late 15th century onwards, the majority of Venetian sumptuary laws were directed at women's clothing, which was costly and extravagant. In 1507, an anonymous letter denounced 3 patrician women for ruining the city with their expensive, elaborate clothing purchases. Though clothing was highly regulated, it was exceedingly difficult to regulate due to the changing nature of fashion. When a style was banned, something even more elaborate would pop up and take its place. Chopines, like those worn by Carpaccio's women, may have been so tall due to this legislation. Laws were passed banning long trains that would trail behind women's dresses. Women still wanted to express their wealth through the amount of fabric that they draped on their bodies, so they made themselves taller to show off more fabric without breaking the law against trains. Serving as antithesis to the modesty encouraged by sumptuary legislation were the fashions of the courtesans. Though the breast-bearing style that would prove popular with foreign visitors was not yet in vogue, courtesans flaunted the sumptuary laws, for example, wearing long strands of pearls and high chopines. Margaret Rosenthal states that Venetian courtesans were trendsetters of fashion, crossing lines, subverting norms, and disobeying sumptuary laws that patrician Venetian women would not have dared to without the precedent of the courtesans. Rosenthal claims that the courtesans of Venice did not subscribe to the societal norms that dictated the types of clothing that Venetian women were meant to wear at different points in their lives. Specific clothing styles were associated with being a bride, a wife, and a widow, and the courtesans did not care about these distinctions or class distinctions, and they wore what they wanted, which, according to their critics, caused mass confusion and moral panic. However, this social ambiguity, expressed through ambiguity of dress, proved popular among the women of Venice. Though Cesare Vecellio, in his woodblock prints of the 1590s, illustrates differences between the clothing of these women, the reality is that on the Venetian street, it may have been difficult to distinguish a woman's social standing simply by what she was wearing. The delicious visual ambiguity between patrician and courtesan is well displayed in Two Venetian Ladies. Carpaccio's painting has been titled in a number of ways, including Two Venetian Courtesans. Viewed on its own, this painting has a puzzling meaning. offering little interpretation or identification of these women, if they are even meant to be identified. Their obvious wealth, which they wear on their bodies, could indicate that they come from rich families or that they support themselves through their status as courtesans. These two Venetian women flaunt the sumptuary laws issued by the Senate. This is visible by the chopines, both worn and discarded, as well as the heavy ornamentation and multicolored nature of the women's dresses and the necklaces that they wear. To me, this painting by Carpaccio is the perfect example of the wonderful confusion and exaggerated form of Venetian clothing of this period. The ambiguity surrounding the social status and position of Carpaccio's women reflects, in a way, the ambiguity of the city of Venice itself. Venice, built from the water up, created its own identity, and these women too fashion their own identities in a way that belongs exclusively to them, no matter who they may be.